Let's start with that quote, because, that really gets to the heart of the man we're talking about today. Someone who didn't just hope for peace, but actually went out and built it, piece by painstaking piece. So today, we're diving into the life of Dr. Ralph Bunche, a true architect of peace on the world stage. Think about that for a second. This is a man who stood right in the middle of two of the 20th century's biggest struggles, the search for global peace and the fight for civil rights in America. So how did one person end up playing such a massive role in both? Well, let's find out. To really understand the world-class diplomat, you first have to understand the young scholar and how his character was forged by some incredible adversity. Ralph Bunche was born in Detroit, but his early life was just marked by tragedy. His parents' health was failing, and by the time he was about 13, both of them had passed away. He was an orphan. And, that could have been the end of the story right there. But it wasn't, and that's thanks to his grandmother, Lucy Taylor Johnson. She was this incredible force who picked him and his sister up and moved them to Los Angeles. To get by, he worked as a janitor, but he poured everything he had into his studies. He didn't just do well, he graduated as valedictorian from UCLA and then set his sights on Harvard, where he was about to make history. And this is the key takeaway from his early life. Bunche's whole approach was shaped right here. He learned firsthand that you could overcome unbelievable obstacles, poverty, prejudice, you name it, through sheer intellect and determination. For him, this wasn't some abstract idea, it was how he survived. Okay, so let's move into the next phase and see how this brilliant academic becomes a strategist who is literally shaping world events. Long before he ever stepped foot in the United Nations, Bunche was an absolute intellectual powerhouse. He founded the entire political science department at Howard University. He was a key researcher for An American Dilemma, which was this huge, groundbreaking study on racism in America. He was even part of President Roosevelt's Black Cabinet, an informal group of Black advisors pushing for a fairer New Deal. Now, as part of this intellectual group called the Young Turks, Bunche was really pushing the envelope. See, at the time, many civil rights leaders were focused almost entirely on racial solidarity, but Bunche and his group came in with a different angle. They argued that you couldn't separate race from economic class. He believed the real path forward was to build coalitions across racial lines based on shared economic goals. It was a really forward-thinking, integrationist idea for its time. So how does he get from the university to the world stage? Well, when World War II breaks out, all of his academic work on colonialism in Africa is suddenly mission-critical intelligence. He gets recruited by the OSS, which was the precursor to the CIA, and then moves to the State Department, breaking a major barrier as its first Black desk officer. This path took him directly to the table where the post-war world was being designed, and he helped write key parts of the United Nations Charter. And this brings us to the moment that would cement his place in history and define his entire public life. I mean, just imagine this scenario. The pressure is astronomical. You're trying to end the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The lead UN negotiator, Count Folke Bernadette, has just been assassinated. The peace talks are in ruins. The whole world is watching. Who on earth could possibly step into that kind of chaos? Ralph Bunche. He had been Bernadette's top aide, and he took over. He brought the negotiators from both sides to the neutral island of Rhodes, and for months, he just did the work. He was famously patient, calm, and unbelievably meticulous, building trust where it seemed impossible. I mean, they say he'd even build relationships over a game of pool. And you know what? It worked. Against all odds, he got it done. He brokered the 1949 armistice agreements. Now, he didn't solve the entire conflict, that wasn't the mission, but he ended the war. He secured a ceasefire that nobody thought was possible. For this absolutely monumental achievement, Ralph Bunche was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1950. And this was huge. He was the first African American, the very first person of color, period, to ever receive that award. Just think about the powerful message that's sent around the globe. But here's the thing, the Nobel wasn't the finish line for him. Not even close. It was more like the starting gun. Bunche went on to be known as the father of peacekeeping. He basically conceived of the whole idea of using neutral UN troops to enforce a ceasefire. And he didn't just dream it up, he directed these massive, complex operations in hotspots all over the world, from the Suez Canal to the Congo and Cyprus. He created the playbook that's still in use today. So this brings us to the really deep and frankly painful paradox of Ralph Bunche's life.
Here you have a man who was celebrated all over the world, but who still had to face the ugly reality of racism in his own country. So on one hand, you've got this guy, a Nobel laureate, an undersecretary general at the UN, a man respected in the capitals of the world. And yet, on the other hand, when President Truman offered him the incredibly high-ranking job of Assistant Secretary of State, Bunche said no. And the reason is just a punch to the gut: segregated housing in Washington, D.C. He was a man who could negotiate peace between nations, but he refused to subject his children to the indignity of Jim Crow. He took a stand, and it cost him one of the top jobs in the U.S. government.
He was constantly walking this impossible tightrope. His early activism made him a target during the McCarthy witch hunts. His job at the UN demanded neutrality, so he often couldn't speak out against U.S. policy as forcefully as he or others might have wanted. And yet, despite all those constraints, when it really mattered, he showed up. He was right there, marching shoulder to shoulder with Dr. King in Washington and again in Selma, putting his reputation on the line.
And I think this quote from him just says it all, doesn't it? That was his moral compass. That's what guided him, whether he was in the halls of power or on the streets of Alabama. Now, even his relationship with the movement had its complexities. He was a pragmatist through and through, and he actually disagreed with Dr. King's decision to link the civil rights and anti-Vietnam War movements. He was worried it was a strategic mistake that would cost them political support. He kept working at the UN right up until he retired due to illness in 1971, and he passed away later that same year.
Today, you'll see his name on university buildings, parks, libraries, and yet for a man who was so important, there's a strange kind of silence. As one source points out, his name is now seldom mentioned when we tell the grand story of American history. And that leaves us with this final, really important question. Why? Why has a man who stood at the absolute crossroads of global diplomacy and the fight for justice at home, why has he faded from our collective memory? Ralph Bunche's life is this incredible testament to the power of intellect, patience, and unwavering principle, a true architect of peace. And that is a legacy absolutely worth remembering.